So in chapter 7, it was short and sweet, but it was Maggie having a nightmare. She said she was really afraid. She was having a really bad dream. And when she woke, her brother said that she was screaming her real name, which is Margaret, which turns out to be the name of the ghost haunting the mansion. So let's get on to chapter 8. I showed up at Sonia's Suites at 9:45 to find the picture window covered with 2 large pieces of crisscross plywood. Someone had scrawled "open" on one of them in all capital letters with a red Sharpie. It was functional, but a far cry from yesterday's gorgeous welcome sign. When I knocked on the front door, Sonia's cousin Felicity looked up from the countertop she was cleaning at the back of the store. She seemed surprised to see me. "We're closed," she called. At least, I think that's what she said. My lip reading skills are decent, but not perfect. "I know," I said, nodding and pointing to the door. "Can you let me in anyway?" She walked over to Joshua, who was mopping up behind the counter. They talked, then he looked at me and nodded and gave me a thumbs up sign. Felicity walked over and opened the door a crack. "We met yesterday, remember? I'm Sonia's friend Maggie." Felicity opened the door a bit more so I could squeeze through. "Right. Ricky mentioned you might stop by. Please excuse the mess." "Don't worry about it," I replied as I looked around the store. "Okay if we sit down and talk for a minute?" She looked around nervously. I have a lot to do before we open. This isn't the best. This will only take a few minutes," I said, interrupting. 10 at the most, and then I'll leave you alone." "It's okay, Felicity," Josh called from across the store. "I'll cover for you." Felicity didn't say anything, but I could tell by the look on her face that she wasn't thrilled with his offer. I walked over to the nearest booth and took a seat before she could change her mind. "Please join me," I said, whipping out my notebook and looking up at her expectantly. Felicity sank down into the booth across from me. She was pretty like Sonia, and they were both tall and thin and long-limbed. Of course, Sonia is tall for a 7th grader, and Felicity is just plain tall for anyone, except for maybe a basketball player. Then she'd be average, or perhaps below average, but only a bit, I think. I actually don't know the average height of a professional basketball player. I could look it up. I suppose that's what Wikipedia is for. Or there's math, if the statistic isn't really available. But who has time for that? Not me. I have interviews to conduct. "So, how long have you been in Brooklyn?" she asked. "Just a few weeks," said Felicity. "Sonia told me you're from Indiana?" Felicity nodded. "Indiana's pretty far from here, huh?" I said. Felicity rolled her eyes. "Tell me about it." "I'm from the tiniest town in the middle of nowhere. It's the exact opposite of New York. This is the first real city I've ever been to, unless you count Chicago. I was there once on a school trip." She filled with the salt and pepper shakers as she spoke, staring at them rather than meeting my eye. I couldn't help but notice that as Felicity talked, she kind of rambled on. I wondered whether that was always the case, or she was nervous about speaking with me in particular. And if so, why? What did she have? Did she have a legitimate reason to be worried? Just then, Josh came over with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "Here you go," he said. "These are in the house." "Thanks," I said, "but what are they for?" Josh shrugged. "I don't know. You look thirsty." I took a sip. That's delicious." "Joshua makes the best hot chocolate," Felicity said, smiling up at him. "Old family recipe," Josh said with a wink. Felicity turned back to me. "Do you have any more questions, or can I get back to work now?" "I'm actually just getting started," I said, checking my notes again. What brought you to New York exactly?" "You're writing this all down?" she asked, glancing at my notebook. I remember things better when I write them down, and sometimes it helps me make connections later. Felicity swirled her spoon around in her mug, and some cocoa splashed over the edge. "Oh no," she cried, alarmed, and when she reached for napkins to clean up the hot chocolate, she knocked over the entire mug with the back of her hand. Hot chocolate spilled all over the table, and the mug began to roll. Felicity reached for it, but rather than standing it upright, she pushed it off the edge and shattered it on the floor. "Yikes!" she yelled. I cringed. Joshua ran over with a mop to clean up the mess. I had to wonder, was Felicity nervous? or simply klutzy? Or was she pretending to be klutzy because she was bent on sabotage? Or was I jumping to conclusions too fast? Why would she want to ruin her aunt's new shop? Her aunt who was responsible for Felicity having a place to stay in New York. I drew a big question mark in my notebook. I would have written down more specific questions, except Felicity was squinting down at the page as if she were trying to read my notes upside down. I wondered why she was so interested. Her behavior made me even more suspicious. What are you? She asked. Some sort of junior police officer? I'm more of a amateur detective, I said, watching her carefully. She didn't seem to be making fun of me, but the question seemed odd. You mean like Nancy Drew? She asked. I used to read those books all the time. Kinda, I said. So how are you related to Sonia exactly? We're first cousins. Our moms are sisters. How old are you? 18, she said. I was supposed to start college this year, but I'm taking a gap year instead. So you work at the Gap too? I asked. No, said Felicity. A gap year means a year off. I'm supposed to be finding myself, figuring out who I am and what I want to do with my life. That way, college won't be a waste of time. My parents don't think I have enough direction, so they sent me here to Brooklyn. Do you agree with them? I asked. No, I've got plenty of direction. I just don't want to move in the direction they want me to. Here's the real story. I want to go to art school, and my parents want me to go to business school. We couldn't agree, so we compromised. I'm taking time to explore both art and business. That makes sense, I said. In theory, yes, said Felicity. I'm taking a figure painting class at Pratt, the art college in Brooklyn. Working here was part of the deal because it's given me experience with business. Plus, I need the money because my parents want to teach me the value of $1, whatever that means. So how do you feel about working at Sonia's Sweets? She asked. I asked. It sounds like you're not so excited about it. It's fine, she said with a shrug, except for all the flying glass. I guess you could say it's a lot more exciting than I thought it would be. She peeked over her shoulder at Joshua. Let's talk about the flying glass, I said. Do you have any idea who would have destroyed such a gorgeous window? Not a clue, Sonia replied quickly. That's what we're all wondering, right? Did you notice anything suspicious yesterday? Or any customers who seemed particularly odd? I was busy working, said Sonia. Check out my hands. They're totally wrinkled from all the dishes I had to wash. Sonia held out her hands, palms facing me. They did look a bit pruny. Her nails had specks of green and blue around the edges. She noticed I was noticing them. That's paint, but it won't come off no matter what, said Sonia. What are you working on? I asked. We're doing self-portraits, said Sonia, which aren't my favorite thing, but my teacher is amazing. Sonia told me that you're living with her family, I said. Yep. Sonia and I share a room and everything. It's like we're suddenly sisters, which is funny because we're both only children. Felicity looked behind her again. Joshua, I noticed, was lingering in the background. He kept mopping the same 2 feet of floor, the tiles of which were already sparkling. He obviously was eavesdropping. I didn't mind exactly, I just found it strange. I put the letter J for Joshua in my notebook. Felicity pretended to not read it, but I saw her eyes narrow in onto a squint. I turned to a fresh page and said, Sonia and her mom are pretty excited about the soda fountain. I know, said Felicity. It's all they've been talking about since I've been here. They've got a lot writing on it, I said. So let me ask you again. Do you have any idea who might have broken that window? Felicity shook her head. Nope. I wasn't getting very far, which frustrated me. On some level, I knew what the problem was. Detectives aren't supposed to ask yes or no questions. Leading questions, the kind that require more thought and explanation, are how you get interesting information. So, for example, I shouldn't have asked Felicity where she was from. I should have said, tell me about yourself. But for some reason, maybe it was for the fact that Felicity was already so uncomfortable, things just didn't pan out that way. Joshua was outside now, sweeping the sidewalk. I lowered my voice and pointed to him. How well do you know this guy? Who? Felicity asked, even though there wasn't anyone else in front of the shop. Joshua, I said. That's his name, right? Oh, him. Yeah, I guess that's his name. I can't keep track. She brushed her bangs off her face and rolled her eyes. I'm so bad with names. In fact, I'm bad with faces too. But he just brought us hot chocolate, and he's the only other employee here. The only one you're not related to, that is. I couldn't believe I had to point this out. Felicity turned bright red. That's true. I guess I do know who you're talking about, but I hardly know him, I swear. Felicity was a bad liar. Not only did she completely fumble her answer, but I have had hard evidence proving the opposite of what she was saying. Yesterday at the opening, she and Joshua were totally chummy. They spent the whole afternoon joking around and talking, even after the glass had been shattered. They'd been laughing about something. So why was she pretending she didn't know who he was now? It made no sense, unless she was hiding her relationship with him for some reason. My mind raced as I tried to make connections. Maybe Joshua was responsible for the picture window destruction, but Felicity didn't realize it until today, which is why she's trying to distance herself from him now. Or maybe Felicity was responsible and she was trying to frame Joshua somehow, unless they're working together. But if it was just the two of them, how did they manage to break the window from outside? And what could be their motive? So far, Felicity has been acting different, like everybody else. She's not giving straight answers. Did you hear about the salty pie? I asked Felicity. I'm wondering if maybe there's a connection. Like maybe the person who destroyed the window was working from inside the shop. I noticed that Felicity was suddenly alert and staring at me. She had this funny expression on her face, a type of frozen fear, like a deer caught in the headlights. Maybe I was finally getting somewhere. I waited, watching. There's no connection, I swear, she said. How can you be sure? Because I did it. Felicity blurted out, covering her face in her hands. I mixed up the sugar and the salt. I'm so sorry. It was ridiculous. I wasn't it wasn't just the pie you had that was ruined. I destroyed all 10 of them. I feel so bad for my Aunt Ricky, and I should have told her the truth yesterday, but I was so embarrassed. I see, I said, writing this all down. Are you going to tell your Aunt Ricky? Felicity asked. I don't know, I said. Don't you think do you think I shouldn't? I'm just too embarrassed about it, said Felicity. She leaned closer. Do me a favor. Don't say anything, and I'll tell her on my own time. I don't want to be a tattletale, I said. So I guess if it doesn't come up, I won't mention it. But if she asks me, sure, Felicity said. That makes total sense. If she asks you, fine. But why would she? I'll tell her eventually, I promise. Thanks, Maggie. You're the best. She jumped up and gave me a hug that smelled of vanilla perfume. Okay, I've got to run. We're supposed to open soon, and my aunt will be here any minute. She's not going to be happy if things aren't set up exactly the way she wants them. Felicity was gone before I could ask her another question. I flipped through my notes, searching for any useful information, but couldn't find any. Based on what I knew, it was not surprising that Felicity had mixed up the salt and the sugar. But was she really klutzy and awkward, or was she hiding something? So we figured out one mystery. Back in chapter 1, when they were eating the pie and they said it was salty, tasted like the ocean, salty ocean. They couldn't figure out why. Well, Felicity mixed up the sugar and the salt, so it made the pies taste bad. So they did not like the pies. No like. But now, why else is Felicity acting different? Does she have something to do with the broken window? Or, like Maggie asked, is she just really klutzy and awkward? Stay tuned for chapter 9.